I love tea. I drink it every day. I get the privilege of starting my day in the paddocks, having a look at these beautiful hedges, and I've got the most pristine scenery that I'm walking around looking at. And I head into the office to some of the most amazing and talented people that I've worked with.
This is The Producers. I'm Dani Valent. Other than water, tea is the most popular beverage in the world, grown extensively in China, India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and even Turkey. Australia barely factors when thinking about tea-growing countries, so it's something of a surprise to learn that Nerada Tea in Queensland grows enough tea to make 750 million cuppas every year. Long-time employee and now managing director Tony Poyner fell into the industry, but finds tea is easily interesting enough to occupy a person for several lifetimes.
Hello, my name's Tony Poyner and I work for Nerada Tea in far north Queensland. My role here is manager and director of the processing and the production of green leaf to turn it into that beautiful Nerada tea. So here on the Atherton Tablelands, we're bordered by World Heritage National Park. So it's all ex-dairy country, so it's beautiful, beautiful, rich volcanic soils. And we've got 3 farms, or certainly 2 estates we own, and a bit of land that we're leasing that had tea on it, which we're harvesting 320 hectares or 321 hectares all year round. That produces something like 1.2 to 1.5 million kilos, depending on how good our season is, which is like 750 million pots of cups of tea. So that's a lot of cups of tea to be drunk in Australia annually.
It took a while for Tony Poyner to realise he's a country boy at heart. When he was seeking work in regional Australia, tea was initially more of a practical solution than a passion, but work at Nerada soon swept him up and he became steeped in tea culture.
Look, I fell into the tea industry some 30 years ago. I'd been jumping from job to job, and my first son was born, and I'd done a fair bit of work, up and down the East Coast. I'd spent some time in Sydney doing different work, and I finally come back to far north Queensland after realising that I was pretty much a country boy at heart. And then I did, again, multiple jobs for a while, and I answered this ad about this new tea factory that was being built, because the original Nerada plantation was down at Innisfail on the coast, and they were at that stage building a new factory here up on the Atherton Tablelands, whereby they'd already planted some, couple of hectares of tea. And so I answered this ad because I sort of had to man up, because my boy was just been born. I thought I'd have to go and get a real job here. And realistically, I started in construction of the factory, and then went on to commissioning, and then I was working on the factory floor, and then I got into shift supervising and tea making, and then assistant manager. And so the cycle went on until I spent a rather large stint then, after doing manufacturing for many, many years. I took over the control of the estates and went right through the husbandry side, and then ultimately into the manager and director's role here in far north Queensland. So a 30-year history with the company, but been so fortunate as to have done multiple roles within the company, which it's just never been anything but a great place to be. And you look over the fence every now and again and you go, oh no, Christ, he's really, really good. So it's kept me busy, and it's never let me down.
Tea has never been a major Australian industry, but commercial crops do date back to 1880. Nerada's journey was something of a reclamation, followed by ongoing innovation and commitment over generations.
The Australian tea backstory is rather a tumultuous one. So, look, it started in 1880 with the Cutton brothers down at Mission Beach. They found this parcel of land down on the coast at Mission Beach, and it was all obviously really horrible terrain, rainforest, and they cleared this land, and they had a small holding, and in part of that small holding, they had tea, coffee, vegetables. So for some 20 or 30 years, they farmed this land, and it's pretty wild country up here, and multiple cyclones, and I think it was the second or third cyclone just totally destroyed this farming land that they'd had, which had tea on it. And from there, they walked off the land, and from there, the story was lost for some time, until it was talked about, heard about, and Dr. Alan Maroof, marched his way in there, trekked in there, found these tea trees because he knew what they looked like, so he was rather familiar with them. And, bugging me dead if he didn't find them and then produce tea plants from those original tea trees. And then, he was in and out of that cycle of growing tea plants back in the 50s. And the original Nerada plantation down here in Innisfail was actually started from those beginnings. The company is owned by the Russell family. Joan and Tristan are the people currently and Joan's a Sydney girl. I now work for Tristan for many years. I now work for his son, John Russell. So it's a family run and owned business. And you just couldn't get a better family to work for. So they, took over the reins of Nerada many, many, many years ago. And they've done a great job in innovating and keeping it running, and they're very, very good to work for.
The hardy, long-lived plant, Camellia sinensis, is the basis of countless types of tea, depending on how it's grown, harvested, processed and brewed. Tony talks us through the endless permutations of tea. So
people don't necessarily actually, as you say, think about a tea being produced in Australia. We have the largest tea plantation here in far north Queensland at 321 hectares, but it really is a grain of sand in the scheme of things, because tea is the second most consumed beverage on the planet after water. So tea is steeped in history. It goes back for thousands of years. There's so much tea consumed globally. It's actually phenomenal. And the Camellia sinensis plant, that beautiful little tea plant, produces everything from your white teas, green teas, oolongs, which is half semi-fermented, and then your black teas. And then there's every variation you can think of in between, which is harshly cut, rolled. And every facet of its production can produce different characters. And then you actually have the nuances of locality, so altitude, where it's grown, soil types. So you could live multiple lifetimes and still have plenty to learn about this topic. Tea is rather a hardy plant, and realistically left to its own devices, it's actually quite nondescript. So it has a beautiful flower, but it's only a small flower. But the tea is very hardy. So once you've got your pots, or certainly your small plants established for whatever you're going to grow, whether it's multiple estates or just a backyard garden, it takes 3 to 5 years before you can harvest off them. They have a lifespan, or a productive lifespan, of 80 years if they're tended correctly. So they're a lifetime crop, which is, phenomenal, really. So their length of production being 80 years and longer. I've been on plantations where I've seen tea trees being harvested at 120 years. Here, our estates are probably babies in comparison, 30 years to 40 years in some areas, probably more like 30 years of age. These tea trees have quite some time to go. I mean, on the one estate here, we have 3 million trees. So it takes a lot of trees to produce those cups of tea, because we only harvest the very top 2 leaves in the bud. So the Australian tea industry is rather unique because we mechanically harvest, but we're world leaders in that aspect. And we produce something like 7 million kilos, 6.5 to 7 million kilos of green leaf off our estates in the season. And the season runs from 6 to 8 months, depending on how cool it gets in winter. So Look, it's a rather an interesting topic. The husbandry is really quite unique. We have no pests in Australia, so we use no pesticides. We use no fungicides. We use very, very little herbicide, if any, at all, because of the way we actually, our husbandry, the way we grow the bushes together to produce one bowling green table. So, it has no room for weed ingress. So it's fascinating. I mean, I start my day on the estates every day, and it's just a great place to work.
Harvesting at Nerada Tea is a little like painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Once you've finished, it's time to start again. Nerada uses their own bespoke harvesters to delicately trim the tea plants, harvesting up to 3 tonnes of green leaves every hour.
So in the harvesting season, the bushers work on what we call a 21-day round. So each paddock is working on a 21-day harvesting cycle. So when we go out, or when I go out in the mornings to have a look at the harvesting, because we can harvest 24 hours a day in peak season, we're looking at the leaf that's come off it, the cut height, the quality of the cut that's been left behind, because the quality of the hedge, the way it's been left, and the cleanness of the cut will dictate the amount of crop we get in another 21 days' time. So the size and the scale of the estates are as such that we're harvesting 24 hours a day, and by the time we've finished our 3-week or 21-day round, we actually start again. So it's a perpetual harvesting cycle for up to 6 months of the year. I head out there, I'm looking at the cut, I'm talking with the operators, we're working within 5 mil increments on the top of the hedge. So we're checking that we haven't cut too low, cut too high. All of that does affect the quality of the tea that's produced, the quality of and the quantity of the next harvesting round. So really very, very important. I mean, the harvesters were developed in far north Queensland at Gordonvale, just down the hill. So the evolution of them over the last 30 years has been quite significant. And these machines are running across the hedge at 6 kilometres an hour, harvesting as much as 3 tons of green leaf per hour. And it's the reason that we can stay, economical within such a varied, rigorous and difficult industry where prices are quite low and the commodity price for tea is very low. So we've had to be very, very clever at what we do. The hedges are very dense, and we do that on purpose. The track rows themselves, we call them track rows, where the machines actually enter. And these machines are huge. They're 16 feet or nearly 5 meters across. And they're going in and they're taking a very large swath in their path, but they're only taking off the very top tips. And the hedges are very closely compacted. So it's rather a unique budding cycle is what we call it. So for every 2 leaf and a bud that you take off, and we've just come up 20 mil from the last harvest. So the last harvest was at, say, 1.2 meters or 1,200 millimeters. This harvest will be 1,220 millimeters. And what we're doing is we're clearing the little bud that's formed. It's actually a 42-day cycle harvest in every 21 days. Sounding complicated, but 21 days for the bud to form, then 21 days for that bud to grow. So each time we cut, we take off what was actually produced as a bud 42 days before. So it's a beautiful little dance of these buds and these 2 leaves and a buds coming up over a 21-day or 42-day cycle. Tightly closed hedges, almost difficult to walk through. And unless you walk in a track row, you actually can't walk through them. But that stops the sunlight getting to the ground. It stops the weeds from germinating. It then stops us having to use chemicals. So it's a very good system. So with regards to the harvesting of the 2 leaves and a bud, it gets discharged or decanted from the harvester into a holding bin, which is transported to the factory on a trailer with a tractor. So these bins hold 4 tons of green leaf. They go in from there across the weighbridge where they're then stacked into what's called the withering system. So to produce black tea, you need to let these 2 leaves in a bud sit and be aerated for approximately 12 to 20 hours. 14 hours is a nice number, where the enzymes in the leaf start to break down. So there's a natural decomposition, or certainly changing of the chemical structure within the leaf that starts to happen. So to make black tea, that process is absolutely critical. So those compounds and all those elements start to change because they've been cut from the bush, so they know that they're going through their next cycle in their life cycle, or death cycle, whichever way you'd like to put it. And then after 14 hours of withering, they enter the factory, and those 2 leaves in the bud are then all ruptured. Every cell is ruptured, and as soon as it's ruptured, the leaves start to oxidize. So biting an apple and leaving it on the bench, and that browning off that happens is exactly what happens when you convert the green leaf into black tea. We do that on purpose. We rupture every cell. We cut it down to size to produce tea bags, or the pot bags, the pot tea, whichever we choose. We then oxidize it and tumble it for around an hour and a half. And in that hour and a half, all of these theoflavonoids and theorubicins, which is color and strength, and all your polyphenols and all of those beautiful compounds that produce the actual flavor and color of the tea, are actually produced in that oxidization process. So, and it has to be done at 68 to 70% moisture. So the moisture is critical, the temperature is critical, 26 to 30 degrees, hour and a half, so 90 minutes. And then we put it into the dryers, and we dry them over an 18-minute drying cycle, which is quite critical as well, because you want to remove water but not volatiles. And then we discharge out of the dryers at 3%. We don't dry it completely, because those last 3% is your volatiles and your oils and your cup strength. And then we sift it, sort it into its different sizes, into bulk bags here in far north Queensland, before transporting to Brisbane to the packaging factory, where it's packaged and distributed nationally.
Tea connoisseurs will often tell you tea bags are inferior. But is that right? Nerada produces leaf tea and tea bags. What's the difference between the tea that's used for the 2 brewing methods?
With regards to tea, there's a common misperception that tea bags is the sweepings off the floor. So it's been around in our culture for as long as we can remember that tea bags are an inferior quality product. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth, actually. It's all the same. 2 leaves in a bud get ruptured. They get cut to size in our factory by machines called CTCs, which stand for cut, tear, and curl. And that then is all oxidized at the same time, at the same rate, dried at the same rate. And then some very clever and rather large sorting equipment sifts it to its different grades, which then there's a packing element, which is the weight. So we have to grade it to the correct sizing and weight so that it can go into the packets, which is very important, because that comes back to leaf quality as well. So the difference between tea bags and leaf tea is really, truly just the size that it's been screened to. So that really is it in a nutshell.
It's not all tea and biscuits. Nerada faces some of the cost challenges that are common to all primary producers, as well as some that are specific to tea.
The challenges are all of our major inputs are expensive. So fuel, labour, electricity, all of the compliance models we have to abide by are all very, very expensive. Our secret to success, and it gets tougher every year, and we just have to find more ways to innovate, is the fact that we still get realistically very, very low prices. I mean, tea coming into the country is produced around the world. So, all of the teas that we're competitive against are imported, and they come in at rock bottom prices. And look, I'm no angel. I like to buy specials, and I like to go and save $1 where I can. But, when it comes to what's being purchased, Nerada is produced in Australia. It's a quality product. It's very, very difficult to compete price-wise against imports. And it's at this stage that I'd urge everyone to actually have a look at the packet and have a look at where things are produced. If you're interested in purchasing Australian-made and a very good quality and fresh product that's pesticide-free, it's a good choice. But have a look at your packet and just have a look at where things are produced, and I think you'd be shocked at where a lot of these things are coming from.
Tony Poyner has worked in just about every aspect of Nerada's business, from farm to factory and, of course, to cup. But what is it that keeps him engaged and passionate about his work in tea?
I like, for me personally, it's the diversity that I have within my role, everything from project management through to husbandry, and then everything, with regards to people and logistics in between. But the tea industry, it's romantic. It's, you're taking these most amazingly beautiful bushes that are there with you for a lifetime. You're taking off this beautiful fresh growth. You're handling it with kid gloves. You're turning it from something into something really special that needs to be making a beautiful recipe, has to be done properly every day, and then turning it into a very special product that, millions of people can enjoy. 750 million cups proudly produced and enjoyed in Australia every year. Look, I love it. I love tea. I drink it every day. I get the privilege of starting my day in the paddocks, having a look at these beautiful hedges, and I've got the most pristine scenery that I'm walking around and looking at. Then I head into the office to some of the most amazing and talented people that I've worked with. All have a variety of bows to their string. In the tea industry, people just have to be good at a multiple of different things because it's a seasonal industry in a rural community. So, you're drawing on a lot of strengths from these people. And then I walk in and I'm getting to taste yesterday's manufacturing. So, there's 20 teas sitting on the table, which is core samples of the teas produced the day before. I get to taste those every day. Take a sample home of the nicest teas on the table. One of the tricks, though, is to ensure that every one of those samples tastes exactly the same. And that's the skill of the tea makers that we have in the factory. They iron out all of those nuances, those differences, those night manufacturing and those day manufacturing. And they just tweak the factory just to produce the same quality of cup every day, day in and day out. But no, look, very fortunate. I work with some amazing people in an industry where we don't have to use chemicals, where it's a pristine environment, and realistically couldn't be luckier.
Nerada Tea has just celebrated 50 years in business. It's an Australian success story in a field that isn't necessarily thought of as an Australian industry. Tony Poyner is glad to play his part in a family company that farms, harvests and packages a homegrown product, confident that 750 million great cups of tea are enjoyed through his labour every single year. This is The Producers, a Deep in the Weeds production. I'm Dani Valent. Stay tuned as we talk to some of Australia's best farmers, makers and growers. Follow us on Instagram at Producers Podcast or contact us via deepintheweeds.com.au.